So today's video is going to be on how I made this pumpkin character, and this character is a fully animatable stop motion puppet. So if you wanted to use this character as a little figure, you could pose this character into whatever pose you wanted, and it works really well. So this little character is from the TV show Over the Garden Wall. I've also recreated the main characters from this show into fully animatable figures, and they have fully replaceable parts for animating, like the hands, the blinks, and the mouths. If you want to see how that was made, the videos are in the description, linked down below. But going back to how I made this character, so the character is loosely based on these two characters, and I kind of just merged their designs together, because I wanted something that looked like a classic jack-o'-lantern, but I wanted it to also look like a character from this show. But looking back, I wish I kind of recreated this character. I think he's a lot more unique compared to the character that I actually made. Maybe I'll do that again in the future. Let me know in the comments what you think I should make in the future, because I do look there for inspiration on what to make. But going back to this character, I've also done a second video that is a bit more about how I repainted the pumpkin to look a bit more rustic and a bit more weathered. And again, you can find the link for that video in the description of this video. But moving on from there, what I'm going to do is finally talk about how I made this character. So this character is 3D printed, and I fully designed it myself. And if I take you to this 3D software, you can see why that is, because if I go down, you can see there's all these interlocking tubes. This is because I wanted to make sure the head and the main body had accurate tubing holes for the arms and the legs. And that's just so all these limbs have little tubes on the end, and they slot into the body and get locked in place as they get slotted in, because it fits absolutely perfectly inside. If you didn't want to do 3D printing, what you could do is take a block of wood, probably something like balsa wood that's quite light. Then you carve that down into a sphere. Then you would take a drill and drill some holes into the wooden sphere where the arms and the legs would be. And then you would drill smaller holes into those holes that you've already drilled. Then what you do is epoxy glue brass tubing into these small holes, and that's just so you can slot a smaller tube inside, and they slot in absolutely perfectly. And these brass tubes are called K&S tubes, and it's used a lot in stop motion puppet making. So going back to the puppet that I've made, this character uses 3D printed tubing on the end of the arms and legs, and it's the same thing for the head as well. It uses a little neck wire that has a tube glued on each side, and that's just so it can plug into the body and the head, connecting the two together. And then once it's in, what you can do is rotate the head, and because it's locked in place, it stays in place. So going to how I sculpted the character, so I'm starting off with a cube, and then I'm using a subdivision on it just to kind of round it off. Then I'm going to sculpt it to be the right size and shape, just so it matches the character design. So I'm just using a screenshot from the TV show. And I'm doing this for all the main pieces of the character. To make the hat look a little bit more organic and a little bit less like a traffic cone, what I'm doing is just curving off this cone shape a little bit more. Then to make the head look a little bit more like a jack-o'-lantern, what I'm doing is making cylinders. I'll be using these to cut into the mesh, making it look a bit more like a jack-o'-lantern. And then what I'm doing is sculpting more details into the mesh and giving it these little pumpkin wrinkles to make it look a bit more pumpkin-y. Then to make it where the head can actually sit on the body, what I'm doing is making an indent into the character, which is a sphere that's bigger than the head. And I'm using that to cut into the main body, creating a negative shape just so the head can actually sit on top of the body. Because if the head and the body are surface to surface, what we'll get is that the paint will just scratch off. But with the negative space that we've made, it means the head can smoothly rotate on the spot. And then what I've done is inserted it into Fusion 360, which is a really good CAD software. And I've done this just so I can really accurately lay out where all these interlocking tubes are going to be, and really accurately cut into the mesh. So it's all perfectly sized up down to the millimeter. So all the tubing inside the character interlocks together perfectly, making it a lot easier to assemble and just plug it together once it's done. So with all that done, what I'm going to do is 3D print the head and the body. So after it's been printed, this is what it looks like. Before I can paint this, what I need to do is sand it down a little bit. And this is just so it's nice and smooth for when I get around to painting it. So once I'm done, what I'm doing is just spraying this down with a primer. What this does is basically makes it where the paint has a nice foundation to stick onto. So what I'm doing now is just painting the character with some thinned down acrylic paint. I'm using a really thinned down paint because it reduces how much brush marks you get in your paintwork. And also, I'm really sorry about the bad lighting here. I filmed this 2 years ago and I thought it'd be a really good idea to do some cool purple lighting. And it's a big reason why this video took 2 years to make, because I kept looking at the footage and thinking, this is quite ugly, but ultimately I thought it'd be quite a bit of a shame if this just sat on my hard drive, not going out into the world, so I'll fix it as much as I can and show it to you guys. And yeah, just let me know in the comments if it's okay or not. I did this for quite a few different things that I made, and it made it where I had to throw away a load of content. So if this is alright for you guys, it means that I might be able to save some of those other projects that I put on the back burner. But yeah, let me know if you'd be interested in seeing any of that. Then going back to the video, what I'm doing is just painting on little wrinkles onto the pumpkin body, just so they look nice and textured like wrinkly pumpkins. I'm also keeping this quite minimal, just so it matches the style of the show. Then after finishing painting all the parts, what I'm going to do is spray it with a lacquer, and you do this just so it gets a nice protective coat, so none of the paintwork gets scratched off. Then moving on to the legs and the arms. And they're made from wire that's been twisted together and then epoxy glued onto the 3D printed tubes that I mentioned earlier, and that just makes it where they can slot into the body really easily and they stay in place. And because it's wire, what you can do is pose the arm, so I'm just bending this down. It makes it very poseable and perfect for animation. I recommend using aluminium wire. It's a nice soft wire, and it's the same for the leg as well, so I can just bend this where the knee would be, and then I can do the exact same thing for the neck. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a piece of wire that's got a tube on either end, so one end plugs into the body and the other end plugs into the head, and allow for the head to actually rotate, twisting the wire side to side as it's rotating side to side. So what you're doing is twisting the wire as you're rotating the head, makes it nice and poseable for animating. And as well, what I can do if I need to do any repair work or tweak anything, I can just lift the head off. And then moving on to how I made the arm, and what I did was add fabric glue onto the wire, and I'm just spreading quite a thin layer of this over the wire with a little wooden stick. So I can start wrapping the wire with this thin foam wrap, and I'm doing this just so I can build up the shape of the arm, giving it some more bulk, making it a bit more arm-like. So I'm just wrapping this round and round, because I'm trying to build up the shape of the arm and make it look like an actual arm, because right now it's a little bit too skinny. And then what I'm doing afterwards is wrapping this around the fingers as well, after adding on a bit more glue onto the fingers of the wire. And I'm going to be doing this for all the fingers on the hand. Then after, what I'm going to do to make the arm look like it's made from straw is that I'm going to use this string ribbon material. So to add this onto the character, I'm using fabric glue again, and I'm just adding this onto the foam that I've wrapped around the character's arm. And then I'm taking a strip of this ribbon material and just gluing it onto the surface. So I'm doing this for both sides of the arm, just so it's got a nice coverage on both sides. And then what I'm doing is just trimming off any excess around the top of the arm once it's all dried. And then I'm adding more fabric glue onto the end just to make sure that none of it frays off or comes loose off the top of the arm. Everything's dry, but I just want to make sure there's plenty of glue holding this all together. And then once that's dried, what I'm going to do is go over to the hand, and I'm going to repeat all this for the fingers, where I'm just wrapping this material around the fingers. And I'm doing that for all the fingers on the hand, making sure it's got a nice coverage around each finger. Then moving on, what I'm going to do is add some glue onto the center of the hand. And once that's got a nice coverage of glue, what I'm going to do is add some more material on top. So I'm just gluing that on top. I want to do that for the front and the back of the hand. And then once that's all dried again, what I'm going to do is trim off any excess material with my scissors. And then to help the hands blend into the arms, what I'm going to do is add a little strip around the wrists. And hopefully it hides any little gaps between the hand and the wrist. And then what I'm doing is just painting this a darker colour. And I'm hoping it breaks up the shape a little bit and makes it visually interesting. Then I'm repeating this whole process again for the legs. So I'm just adding on the glue, adding on the material, and then I'm just trimming off any excess. And then once that's all done and the excess material has been removed, what you can do is just plug it back into the body. If you plug it in and it feels a little bit too loose, what you can do is pull the limb back out, wrap some PTFE tape around it, and then plug it straight back in. And it should make it feel a little bit more tighter and less wobbly and less likely to fall out as you're animating. Because by doing this, what you've done is filled in some of that empty space in the tube hole, just making it a little bit less loose and a bit more tighter. So after all the parts are assembled, the character is finally ready to animate. And I also animated this on a green screen just because I didn't have enough space to really build a set. So what I did was made a little square that the character stands on and does his little dance. And then everything else is a green screen. So I just green screened in all these other elements. So this is how the character finally looks, and I'm really happy with it. I was really happy with it. I thought it worked well with the original designs. And because I did finish making this character 2 years ago, it has changed quite a bit since. So if you're interested in seeing how it's been updated, there is a second video that covers that, and the link for that video can be found in the description of this video. And as well, you can find my Patreon, where you can find the 3D printed files for this character if you want to print this off yourself. Anyway, I hope you liked this video. Maybe give it a like, comment and subscribe. Maybe comment down below what you want to see me make next. And have a good day.